I'm with Liberal leader Justin Trudeau and Toronto Centre candidate Chrystia Freeland. And we were just taking some questions from some of the students here at U of T. So I wanted to hear from you. One question that wasn't asked was, what are your LGBT priorities? What issues are closest to your heart? And what are you going to push in the House of Commons?
Well, LGBT rights are human rights. And for me, the need to have a government that is standing up for people's rights from coast to coast to coast, regardless of the situation, is clear. Unfortunately, we have a government right now that is willing to look the other way in terms of certain rights, whether it's trans rights or others, and that's just not acceptable in Canada.
You mentioned gender identity, and obviously trans populations is one of those populations that are more often end up homeless and in sex work and drug addiction and all these things. So I wanted to ask you about your position on C-279. It's still lagging. We still have to get it passed. And unfortunately, you missed the vote.
Yes. I wasn't there for that vote. I was during a leadership campaign, but everywhere I go across the country, I talk about LGBTQ rights. I was proud to stand up and vote on the previous incarnation of that very same bill, because I was in the House for that, and that was important. But as we move, and actually my percentage in terms of voting during leadership is higher than either Thomas Mulcair or Stephen Harper during their leadership. So yes, I missed a few votes, including some that were important, but my stance and support of trans issues and LGBTQ issues in general is unflinching and will continue.
The other big one that we're talking a lot about is HIV criminalization and the need for prosecutorial guidelines. What's your position on this?
Well, listen, people need to be protected by the law, and obviously someone knowingly infecting another person with an STD is assault. But how we go about prosecuting that needs to be based on not based or tinged with discrimination or intolerance, which unfortunately all too often we see. We have to criminalize behaviors, not identities, and the struggles of people living HIV positive or with AIDS is well documented, and people need to be supported, not criminalized. And that's one of the worries that I have, that we have to be wary of as we walk down the path. But there is no question that we need to have people protected from their partners in certain situations.
HIV is obviously a problem here, but it's an even bigger problem over in Africa, and we need to be able to get generic HIV meds over there. And tell me about your position on this. This is another vote that you
I have long supported the CAMR bill. I believe in our responsibility to be fighting disease around the world. I again was there to vote in favor of it during the first iteration of that bill. But obviously, my job is to try and connect with Canadians and talk about these issues out across the country. And like I said, I'm proud of having a better voting record than both Mr. Mulcair and Mr. Harper during their leaderships.
One thing you and I talked about that's really important is LGBT refugees, and changes have been made to federal policy that actually make it much more difficult for LGBT refugees to seek asylum here. How can we change this? How can we make it easier and open up our borders?
Well, the first thing we have to do is recognize the horrific persecution of the LGBTQ community around the world, whether it's Russia or Sub-Saharan Africa or elsewhere. Even some of our friends and allies have a spotty record when it comes to sticking up for people's rights. And Canada needs to continue to be one of those places around the world that shines because we've figured out how to be strong, not in spite of our differences, but because of those differences, and how we welcome people who are facing persecution, torture, even death in their home countries, and therefore don't feel like they have any home country to be safe in. That's what refugees are, and that's what Canada needs to be stepping up to protect and welcome.
What statement can Canada make? What powers can Canada have to help change at the Commonwealth level the anti-sodomy laws that are still very much on the books, that are left over from the British? And how can we change this? How can we free those people?
Well, I think we've demonstrated 40 years since we've decriminalized homosexuality that, on the contrary of people's worry that the family compact would fall apart, we have thrived to a degree that other countries need to be cognizant of. We need to continue to show leadership, and that means engaging. It does mean drawing, in many cases, their best and brightest artists and thinkers who are sometimes living what is considered marginal lifestyles to thrive here in an open and encouraging country. We have to send out the message that human rights issues go beyond borders now and show strong leadership around the world to demonstrate that this is unacceptable. That was the theme that really touched me at this year's Pride, because obviously everyone was talking about Sochi and the despicable Russian laws. To be able to say, look, there are places in the world where this parade would not happen, where politicians would not show up here. That kind of message, to broadcast it strongly around the world with the new mediums that we have for it, is a big role for Canada to play.
I got to ask you about the XL pipeline and a lot of criticism about your support of it. Maybe can you explain a little bit more for me?
Sure. First of all, the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Liberal Party all support developing and expanding the oil sands. The NDP has been very clear on that. They support a west to east pipeline as well, which actually would be a bigger pipeline than the Keystone XL pipeline. So let's not make this about supporting the oil sands or not. All three major parties support the oil sands. Keystone XL has become a flashpoint and a symbol of criticism for people who are very worried about climate change, but because of the lack of any meaningful environmental framework or action by this current government, we've allowed the oil sands to become scapegoats and the poster child for global warming. So blocking Keystone XL has become a symbol for saving the planet, and it's become that because of the complete lack of leadership by the federal government. So for me, blocking something because it's a symbol isn't quite a good enough argument. The Keystone Pipeline, yes, is exporting natural resources, is on fossil fuels, and yes, we want to move beyond fossil fuels. But in the meantime, I don't see that a pipeline that 80% of it will be in the United States, that is about getting our goods to market, that is smaller than the west to east pipeline that Mr. Mulcair endorses, is the big hinge issue that it is. What people want to hear is that a Canadian government or a future Canadian government is serious about developing our natural resources in a responsible, sustainable way based on facts, not fear or ideology, which unfortunately in this case both other parties are doing. So I'm proud to be basing my positioning on facts. I mean, the fact is there are a lot of questions around the rail transport of our fossil fuels, which is going to increase if the Keystone XL pipeline isn't passed. And as we've seen, that is not the solution that people want to see.
Do you regret making the comment about China that it was the country that you most admire?
I don't regret challenging people to think differently about various countries. Obviously, for its human rights record, for its democracy, for all sorts of different reasons, China is not to be admired. Certainly not by a country like Canada. But when you do look at the fact that our politics have been bogged down in partisan attacks, in a lack of action taken on climate change, on issues that are extremely important to Canadians like healthcare, you do have to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be so smug about Canada. Maybe we should be aware that the people we're competing with on the world stage sometimes have less limitations and more flexibility around what they do. And to get people to think about why I'm so focused on doing politics differently, of being positive, being less partisan, being less attacking, more reasonable, is not something that I'll ever regret.
Just before coming here, for my last question, I met with Irene Miller, who is the executive director of Toronto PFLAG, and she wants to organize, hopefully, a luncheon this Wednesday for city councillors and Rob Ford. And I didn't get a chance to ask you when the story first blew up, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the disparaging slur that he did say about you and the situation that we're now dealing with here in Toronto.
I think Toronto is a world-class city that deserves to be noticed by the rest of the world for being the most multicultural city in the world, a city that is doing extraordinarily well. The fact that we are now the butt of jokes on the world stage. I mean, at first there was a little bit of ha ha, Jon Stewart mentioned us again. Now it's just frustrating. Now it's just disappointing. Now we need to move beyond that. Toronto needs leadership that is commensurate with its extraordinariness. And the fact is, right now, our mayor is much more focused on his own problems than he is on the problems facing the city of Toronto and its citizens. I trust Torontonians to move beyond that, but that's something that I worry about, the precedent of a federal politician dictating to a city who should be or who shouldn't be their mayor. I trust Torontonians that they're going to be able to get past this.
Should the province step in?
That's something that the province is hearing, but is still very wary to do. I worry about different levels of government stepping in, because it again hierarchizes levels of government in a way that is not necessarily the reality. I mean, municipal, provincial, and federal governments all serve the same people, and we tend to look at them as one on top of the other. But there are some dangerous precedents if we weigh in that. So I appreciate that your premier is being very, very careful about weighing in on this, because hopefully the council itself and the citizens of Toronto will be able to work this through.